as we go through the presentation. We'll have some questions at the end. We've left lots of time at the end for questions because probably, Nick and Sam, like myself, have probably been answering phone calls, for weeks on this subject. And, we've been doing a lot of this kind of stuff. So I'm thinking that at the end of this, we'll probably have a lot of questions. So we've left a lot of time for the questions. So please, if you have questions, put them in the chat or in the Q&A. And also, at the end of the time, we'll just unmute and have a conversation around it. I think the conversation around this, I think, is quite important because there's the legislation, there's what's happening, I guess, in the state of play. But I guess on top of that, we need to look at the sort of practical strategies of how we kind of work through this process. So I guess that's what this session is all about. So again, you can see the bullet points there: state of play, key changes, and really the opportunities for pest managers. And Sam and I had a conversation this week about it. So we think we've got as much information in this as we possibly can to help you guys make the best decisions. We'll obviously have the Q&A at the end, and we've got an offer with some fuel card money as well at the very end. So we'll reveal that at the end as well. So that's cool. So just jump on that next slide for me, Sam. So I guess just to give a bit of an outlook, so obviously we've been in this review for a few, the kind of implications of the review for the last few weeks. So at Globe here, we've been trying to manage, huge volumes of people wanting, first generations and other products that are not second gens. We've been trying to manage that, which has been quite difficult over the last few weeks. So I've only talked rodenticides and done things with rodenticides with manufacturing stuff for the last 2 or 3 weeks. We're trying to keep up with demand, but effectively probably 90% of what we sold in the past was second gens, and that's now flipped quite a bit at the moment. So it's really difficult to try and keep up with demand, but we're doing this. They're doing the best we can. We also know that there's looking, if you look at the rodent season for this year, looking at some of the data, it looks like we could be in for some sort of mouse plague as well. I know often we cry mouse plague and it doesn't happen, when the conditions are sitting where we think they are. But potentially this year we could potentially look at certainly some high volumes of rodents across the country. So, so I guess in the rural space we're seeing probably an uptake of second gens, and in pest control we see people sort of shying away from it. So I think part of this session was really just to look at where the place fits for second generations, because really if you've got a fairly major problem, it's going to be a second gen that's going to fix that problem for you. So we're going to have to look at that and comply. So I'll hand over to Sam, and he can go through the presentation, and we'll jump back at the end for the questions. So I'll hand over to Sam. So thanks for taking the session, Sam.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you everyone for joining us. Just with Mark's referring to me by my first name, with the assumption that you know who I am. In case you don't, Sam Wood is my name. I'm the Asia Pacific Business Manager for Bell Labs, and we're a specialty rodent control product manufacturer. Also on the call is Nick Jones, who's my colleague. Nick, do you want to say good day?
Hello all.
All right, there it is. So Nick, I'm going to sort of lead the presentation here, and Nick, by all means, jump in. Nick, if I could just ask that Nick is the only person that jumps in. If you have any sort of clarity, any questions, please save them for the end. So I'm going to sort of run through a little bit about what's happened, what it really means, what the key changes are in terms of the regulations regarding the use of second generation anticoagulant rodenticides, and then point out why I don't think this is necessarily a bad thing for our industry, and we'll kind of highlight some of the opportunities that I think it presents. You've probably all been talking about this a lot over the last several weeks. I think through nobody's fault, but maybe some misunderstanding, I do think there's a little bit of misinformation in the marketplace that maybe has led to some panic that I don't believe personally is justified. So hopefully we can resolve some of that and have a bit of a chat about it afterwards. So by way of some background, the APVMA, which is, I'm sure you're all aware, the Australian Pesticides and Veterinary Medicines Authority, which is the organization that registers and regulates all the chemicals, all the products that you use as pest managers every day. They announced in 2021 a reconsideration of all of the registrations of every anticoagulant rodenticide in Australia. This has been, so we sort of knew something was happening. We knew this was going to come. There was no real timeline applied to it. Anytime a timeline was mentioned, it blew out, and it just extended and extended and extended until just before Christmas last year, when we were given some indication about what was to come. And some of you may have been aware of that, and we were given an opportunity to respond, and we certainly did that as manufacturers, and the industry bodies, APVMA, for example, did as well. And then early in March, so very few weeks ago, they gave us 2 weeks notice that these new regulations were going to be implemented, which has caused, as you can imagine, caused chaos for a business like Bell, and similarly for our partners at Globe. So to be clear, a second generation anticoagulant, the active ingredients we are referring to are bromidifenacum, bromadiolone, difenacum, diphthiolone, and flucomyphene. So these are the most commonly used rodenticides in Australia. Pretty much any of the brands you can think of off the top of your head will contain one of those ingredients. So as of the 24th of March, there are now new use instructions mandated for those products. The first generation actives, that's coumatetralyl, difascinone, and warfarin, and primarily in professional, it's coumatetralyl. That's the most commonly used one in the product Racumin. They have not been. There have been no changes to the use patterns presently on those labels. Now, something that's important to point out is that the APVMA's review did not consider everything. It was only focused on one thing, and that was the risk of secondary poisoning to wildlife and non-target species. When questioned about whether they had considered the impact of restricting the use of rodenticide would have on, for example, public health or native wildlife, they were very clear that no, they did not consider that. That was not their remit. Their remit was to look at it only through one lens. So the outcome is presently, well, before I go any further, ultimately, second generation anticoagulant rodenticides will be legislated as restricted chemical products. That means in order to use them, you will have to be an authorized user. Now, at this point, there has been no clarification on what an authorized user is, or an authorized person is, and that is a decision that will be made on a state-by-state basis, and that will follow. We're not there yet. Presently, they are not restricted chemical products. This is a process, a legislative process that takes a bit of time, but at some point, I would suggest in the first quarter of 2027, that will become the case. Now, the outcome of that is ultimately that for retail use, second gens, or SGARs, as I'll refer to them from here on in, will not be available for the public to purchase, which I think we can all agree is a positive thing. As of right now, they are still available for the public to purchase. They should only be available in limited pack sizes. It's not. I mean, we were just talking before we opened the call up. Not all retailers are 100% complying with that, but I think that's more to do with a misunderstanding or a bit of delay in actually rolling it out than it is any ill will on their behalf. So the crucial thing to take away from here, though, is SGARs are not banned. You can still use them. Certainly as professional pest managers, you can still use them. You just must use them in accordance with the new label conditions. And certainly any Bell products that you purchase from Globe will come with the new label conditions affixed, most likely in the form of a sticker on the lid of the bucket. So that's the first point. As I mentioned, the review broke these registrations and I guess the brands and the products into two very distinct categories. What they refer to as commercial and domestic products. Now, personally, I find those that nomenclature and that terminology a little bit confusing. What they're really referring to is products that are sold for use by professionals or products that are sold for use by consumers. So when we're talking about commercial and domestic, we're not talking about where they can be used. We're talking about who can use them. So it's really clear that we understand that it's really important that we understand that there are clear differences between the restrictions on those consumer products, the products that you can buy from the hardware store, than the restrictions on professional use products. Primarily, there's a restriction in pack size that has been mandated and is, I guess, the retailers are catching up in terms of implementation. From now on, or from the 24th of March onwards, they're limited to selling a maximum, I believe, of 300 grams of wax blocks, or it's, I think, 180 or 150 grams of pellet formulation rodenticide. Obviously, as professional pest managers, you don't face those same restrictions. So to reiterate, SGARs are not banned. As long as you are following the new label, then you're in a good place and you are compliant. I think a lot of the fear comes because, and I say fear sort of advisedly, the language that was communicated was, we have suspended the registrations. That kind of gives you the idea and implies that these products are no longer registered and you can no longer use them. That's sort of true. The products are no longer registered, but the APVMA has issued a permit to allow their continued use under these new label instructions. Now, the APVMA has committed to approving new labels and then lifting those suspensions as soon as possible. Initially, they told us, and presumably other manufacturers, that would be complete by the end of March. As you're all aware, it's currently the 16th of April, and that has not yet eventuated, but we're hopeful that it will come soon. Unfortunately, there is no mandatory time limit on that because it's a different sort of process. So we're very much in their hands as far as that process. But the key changes, and I'll go into these in a little bit more depth in the following slides. Number one, targeting mice externally with SGARs is no longer permitted. Now, that doesn't mean you cannot bait mice outside at all. It means you can't bait mice using second generation anticoagulant rodenticides outside. Of course, mice can't read. There will be some, for lack of a better phrase, accidental poisoning of external mice. There's very little you can do to prevent that, but you shouldn't be selecting a second gen to actively target mice in an external environment. Now, the point that I think has really got the industry talking and concerned is the 35-day rule, we'll call it. I'm sure you've all read this. It's kind of a maximum of 35 days of consecutive baiting with SGARs before a mandatory review of the infestation. We'll talk about that in a bit more depth. One or two other things. It requires you to actively search for dead rodents and sort of mandates how you should handle those rodents when you find them. And also states that for externally, I mean, you probably have all been doing this anyway because it's good practice, that tamper-resistant bait stations should be used at all times. Always been good practice, never been a requirement with SGARs before. Now, the consumer products, so to be very clear, what I'm showing you here is the new changes for consumer. These are retail products you would buy from a hardware store or a supermarket. These have very different, well, not very different, but in many cases, quite different restrictions. The key one, I think, on there, or there's two that I think are completely key. One is for consumer use, outdoor use of SGARs is banned completely. Now, that doesn't mean that professionals can't use SGARs at a domestic environment. It means that the homeowner or the householder cannot do that themselves. They're allowed to bait internally in a DIY fashion, but externally totally banned. Of course, how compliant the public is with that is not something that anyone really can control, but it's something to be mindful of. And the 35-day limit that as it relates to consumer use is after 35 days, what it actually says is contact the product supplier or call a professional pest controller. So the product supplier, let's say if I'm a consumer, if I'm going to follow the label instructions to the letter, I've been to, for example, Bunnings, I bought a few rodent blocks. I'm still getting a problem after 35 days. I go back to Bunnings and say, what do? They're going to say, call a professional. So this is really good for our industry. This sort of generates leads, or ultimately should generate leads, because it's kind of mandating that the consumers search for professional help. So let's consider that a referral pathway directly to your business. And it's also worth noting and reminding you, this is only the case whilst we're in the transition to these products becoming restricted chemicals. So this is probably only for the rest of 2026, maybe early 2027, at which point these will no longer be available for consumer use, and professional users will sort of be the only group of people that can legally purchase and utilize SGARs. So I apologize. I know this is a very text-heavy presentation, and there's a lot of information to share. Some of this you'll be familiar with, but we've certainly, as I said, we will discuss in more depth if you have any questions at the end. The language on the left-hand side there, this is the new label language. This is what you'll find on the stickers on top of any buckets of Bell SGARs that you purchase from Globe, or have purchased from Globe in the last couple of weeks and going forward until the new labels are approved. So as I said, right at the top there, no outdoor use for mice. Do not target mice externally with SGARs. If you need to target mice externally, then choose a different product. The rest of it, very, very similar to how it's always been. Be sensible. I've heard a few people raise some concerns about the fifth point down there that says fourth point down that says do not place bait stations more than 2 meters from buildings. Hopefully you're all aware that has been the label language on these products for many, many years. That is not a new thing. That has always been the case. But the final point about again, 35 days without evaluating the infestation state and treatment efficacy. So what does that really mean? I don't think it's really my place to give you an interpretation of that. All you can do is read it as it's written and follow it the way you interpret it. But my feeling is this is written from a perspective of if we are treating an active infestation, which a lot of the time we're not. A lot of the time we're doing what we like to refer to as maintenance baiting and sort of contract management. That for me, that 35 days, I know I just said I'm not going to give you an interpretation. I'm going to give you my interpretation. You're welcome, obviously, to interpret it however you like. For me, what they're saying there is if you're still actively treating an infestation after 35 days, maybe you're going to have to do something a bit different. Maybe you're going to have to consider whether it's a different product or what else needs to be changed in the environment. Is there a hygiene, housekeeping, proofing, whatever it may be, something other than just continual use of SGARs? For me, it's the way I read it is pretty clear that they're just trying to limit the amount of time that SGARs are in the environment. The other thing that's on the label that was never there before is at the bottom there on the left-hand side. We mentioned the dead and the dead, search for and dispose of dead rodents, but also slugs and snails. Now, that's interesting because anticoagulants will not kill slugs or snails, but as you all know, slugs and snails do like to eat these products. And I think I don't have a problem with this language at all. I think this is quite logical. If you have stations or locations that are continually being hit by slugs and snails, move them. If you've got slugs and snails crawling all over your bait, it's probably not going to remain very palatable to rodents. All you're doing is wasting your product and putting that rodenticide into the environment. So select a different place to put it away from those slugs and snails, and maybe look at treating with a molluscicide to control those as well. I think that is new language. I don't think it's anything out of the ordinary or anything to worry about. So this is the minimum standard. I would advise that your service goes beyond that. But I think I think this 35-day thing, while it creates maybe some operational challenges in terms of asking businesses to do something different from what they've done previously, the way I see it is it creates an opportunity to have more, for lack of a more delicate phrase, more opportunity to bill your customers money, right? And that's why we're here. I would see that as a revenue builder. So in summary, those are the primary, the key changes. No targeting mice externally. Again, let me reiterate, that doesn't mean don't kill mice outside. It means don't use SGARs to do it. You've got a couple of other options that are really good for mice. One or a couple that aren't so good. I'm not necessarily here to talk about that. But be very mindful of that, particularly those of you that are in South Australia or Western Victoria. Per the slide that Mark shared at the beginning, we are expecting heavy mouse activity in the coming season. SGARs, perfect choice for internal control, probably not the one, well, certainly legally not the one for use outside during that period. Review at 35 days. How you interpret that is up to you, and I'll be happy to discuss in a few moments. And you should be actively searching for dead rodents during your service. Now, how active that needs to be is not prescribed. You can, whether it's keep your eyes open while you're walking around, then you think you're probably doing that anyway, or whether it means you have to, cover every inch of the premises. That's, again, it's not prescribed, and it's to your interpretation, I would suggest. I have drilled on about this a lot. This is the thing that I really think is key. We need to, as an industry, and the rest of the world, by the way, or a lot of the rest of the world is ahead of us on this. Anyone who's heard me talk before, and forgive me if you have, I've often reference the United Kingdom, which is where I came from and where I started my career 20 years ago. And 20 years ago, or close to 20 years ago anyway, we weren't permanently baiting for rodents in the UK. We were monitoring and introducing rodenticide when it was necessary. And really, that is what this change is I think, is getting at. So the days of just putting SGARs out and hoping for the best, or putting them out just in case something happens, should I think, be over. You, in your individual businesses and your operations, you might find a mechanism by which you have reviewed and determined that it's appropriate to continue using SGARs after 35 days and beyond, in a 35-day or less cycle. And I think that's a good opportunity as well. Maybe where this is your sort of legal lever to pull to increase your service for those customers that were quarterly, for example, or 6 weekly, to bring them into monthly. So I see this as a really positive thing. Once again, just to review again the changes to consumer products, they have very different, stricter restrictions compared with professional, and this is creating a pathway for referrals from the products being sold on the shelf. Now, I've heard in my 10 years or so of working for Bell a number of times from professionals, we just need the public not to be able to purchase these products. Well, now this is what's going to happen, and is happening already. So I think this is a really positive thing. It means that professional pest control, professional rodent control in domestic environments is going to become the domain of professional pest managers more so than ever before. So I see that as a really good opportunity. Now, I've drilled on about mice a bit, so forgive me. But what do we do instead? Now, my take on this is, I mean, we've seen it. You can see it on the screen there, is, do we really need to kill mice outside? Now, obviously, sometimes, yes, we do. And we talked about a mouse plague already. Of course, that's a different sort of environment. But often I think I get the sense we're targeting mice just because they're there, not necessarily because they're causing a problem. And mice live outside. Let's remember that. We also need to get beyond the mindset that all mice are trying to get into the house or the facility or the factory or whatever it may be. That's not always the case. So establish whether it's actually necessary, and if it is necessary, can we do something different? Could we modify the habitat to lower the pressure? That could be as simple as keeping the grass cut short or the shrubs cut back. Could they be trapped instead of using a chemical? Or if a chemical is required, then I would direct you to Fast Track, which is a rodenticide containing the active ingredient bromethylene, as probably the very best choice, even notwithstanding the SGAR situation. I would suggest that Fast Track is probably the very best choice for mouse control anyway. Bromethylene is not an anticoagulant, not subject to the same rules, can continue to be used externally to target mice. So that's something to keep in mind. If you're sure you're targeting rats, go ahead, by all means, use SGARs the way you always have. Just be sure that you're scheduling to review that however you see fit, at or before the 35-day mark after placing those products. And if you're treating an active infestation, I would suggest 35 days is too long to be reviewing anyway. In an active infestation, I'd want to be getting back there much sooner for effective control anyway. Okay. So again, this 35-day rule sort of turns pest managers into professionals in a way, and I say that without meaning any aspersions, without casting any aspersions. We know you're professionals, but it makes the service a more professional service. So as it says on the screen there, less of a commodity and more of a managed program. Now, of course, there's going to be an adjustment period here. We're not just going to expect our customers to completely understand these changes off the bat, but ultimately they're going to have very little choice, and there's a really good opportunity for you and your businesses to communicate this to the business. Going forward, rather than just checking and replenishing bait stations on every visit, there's a few other things you should be doing, probably should be doing anyway. But I would suggest more of a monitoring and reacting program than there's been some bait eaten, let's replace the bait program. This is, in my mind, professional pest control. It's pure, like properly integrated pest management, which is a phrase I think we all like to use, but very often collectively as an industry. And again, I don't mean to cast any aspersions, but collectively as an industry, we talk about integrated pest management a lot more than we practice it. And these new regulations are going to kind of encourage or do encourage sort of more compliant integrated pest management. So this gives you an opportunity to differentiate yourself from your competitors as a more compliant and professional organization. It gives you opportunity to upsell, spend more time. Maybe you can offer, when we talk about habitat management or modification, I'm simply talking about maybe you could be the guy that cuts back the grass for them, or you could subcontract that for them. Maybe there's some simple proofing work that you could do, or once again, maybe you could find someone who could do that on your behalf. So there's opportunities. I mean, those opportunities have always existed, but more than ever, I think these opportunities are important to businesses now. So in summary of what I'm saying there, this I would encourage you not to see this regulatory shift as a threat, but actually a really positive thing and a platform for elevating the professionalism of our industry, and ultimately increasing your revenue. And again, I recognize that it's going to require some operational changes, and that's going to be challenging for everyone on different scales. But I truly believe this is ultimately a good thing. And I say that as someone who's got a lot of SGARs to sell and a reduced market, but I say it with honesty as well. So, Mark, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. Thanks for that, Sam. That's fantastic. We'll just open up the questions. I'll leave that slide up. So we've brought this promotion forward. I think it was a later promotion we were going to have, but we pulled this forward. So with the SGARs contract and die track, there's sort of different levels of spend to get fuel cards. So we're going to run that will be out on email tomorrow. But yeah, that's going to be run this month as well. So I'll leave that there just now. I guess Sam and I kind of talked about this, and we just wanted to leave a bit of time for questions. So if there's any questions, take yourself off mute. You can jump in. I don't see anything in the chat at the moment, but I'll just double check the Q&A.
While you're doing that, I should just ask Nick, do you have anything to add or anything you think I've missed?
The only one, just to clarify, because I've had this a couple of times today, if you've already had products sitting in your shed or your van or in the office or anything that don't have these stickers, you are still deemed to have received this permit. So even products without all these conditions and everything on it, like everything you'll get going forward off Globe will have this, but all the products that are sitting there, even if they could be 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, whatever they are deemed to have this permit and operate under this new label.
Yep.
That's a very good point. Yeah, good point. Thanks, Nick.
It's got to see my lad. Get his hand up when you take it off mute, my lad. You'll be able to talk to us.
Okay. Thank you guys for your time. The biggest confusion, I guess, for us, it's the 35 there, and how do we handle that onwards going? Obviously, we've got, a variety of different clients, from residential, commercial, industrial. Some sites we got over 300-400 bait stations, and there's little, integrated pest management you can do. Just to touch, so going to residential, if we've got a site, so what we've been doing follow-ups standard from get-go, and bait stations. Now, baiting, sitting, and soft floors. So normally we do a baiting and do a follow-up after 4 weeks, and the baits, if they've been touched, we top them up and leave them with them. Especially going into winter. So I understand. I think now we have to remove all the baits. Don't leave them on site after 35 days?
Well, not necessarily after 35 days it must be removed, but after 35 days it must be reviewed. But
yes.
If I guess what you're getting at there is that typically after a second visit you wouldn't schedule another one. The new label requirements would require that you essentially do schedule another visit to either
a third visit.
Yeah, to either review again or to remove. That's correct.
Okay, so and then at the third visit, if we have, let's say, 20% activity, does that keep going, or do we just top it up and leave the baits? Given this roof void is secure, no other animals are there and everything.
Yeah, so I can see what you're getting at. I think the way the label language is written is to basically say 35 days it should be reviewed or removed. That doesn't mean after the first 35 days. I think that's sort of on the way I read it, at least, is an ongoing 35 day, every 35 day or less reviews. Yeah. So whilst I absolutely take your point, and I think you make a very valid one, that bait left in a roof is pretty secure from everything else. It should, if you don't want to keep returning, then it should be removed. And I mean, at that point when you mentioned the 20% consumption, that's an operational decision that I wouldn't like to necessarily comment on. But I guess the way I would approach it personally is like at the point that the bait is no longer being consumed, then that's when I'm going to finish that job, as it were. And there might be 3, it might be 5, there might be more visits.
Mm-hmm. And okay, and like so we do have other sites, like for instance, CBD, it's notorious, like doesn't matter what you throw at it. We have some sites that we are baiting literally every 2 weeks. And would that just be an ongoing? We'll just leave it on as an ongoing program every 2 weeks? And
yeah, I would suggest if you're getting consumption, you're 2 weeks as well within that 35-day window, and if you're getting continued consumption, certainly that would be justifiable. I don't think anyone would argue that that's justifiable to continue the use of the products. So in that case, sure.
Yeah, I think if there's activity there, that's your justification for being able to reapply. I think the grey area really comes in the future as if you've got a number of stations on a site and there's no activity for a longer period of time. What's the process then? Do you keep where there's a wee bit of activity, do you keep some baits around there, or do you move other things? So it's I guess we're kind of just wading through this the best we can. But yeah, if you're there inside the 35 days and there is activity, well, and that's what your notification is saying, that there's activity and you're going to roll again. Yeah, I think you're able to just keep using second gens in those circumstances from certainly my interpretation of it.
Yeah.
And just one more, sorry, I know there's other guys. In regards to multi-feed baits, what is the consequence as the industry switching to use more multi-feed baits? I guess a concern is that resistant can come up with multi-feed baits. If a rat, for instance, has a feed once, goes somewhere else for a feed and doesn't actually die and has the chemical in its body, but it's not dead. What's the consequence there?
Okay. Well, the primary one is, so you're referring to first generation anticoagulants. The primary one is efficacy. There's a reason that second gens exist, and that's because certainly resistance, as you mentioned, but largely speaking, they're not particularly efficient at killing rodents, but particularly mice, by the way. Rats are very, and not all first gens are equal, but they're very effective at killing rats in most cases. But mice, and they do kill mice. They just have to eat a lot of it, and it takes a long time. The consequence would be, yeah, I would say efficacy and an increased risk of the development of resistance, as you mentioned. Just to be clear, though, resistance doesn't come around quite the way you described it. That's what you're describing there is kind of like a tolerance through, you know, a slight exposure, almost like the way a vaccine might work. Resistance is always a genetic mutation, but we do know that genetic mutations that confer resistance to first gens are substantially more common than they are that confer resistance to second gens, particularly brodifacoum and diphthiolone. So that's one thing. But what you would find if you switched wholeheartedly to first gens is you'd be using a lot more bait and taking a lot longer to manage your infestations.
Yeah, no, that's good. Cool. Thank you.
I don't know who was first, whether it was James King or Liv Hurst. I think it may have been Liv.
I think it was James.
Was it James? Okay, sorry, James.
I'm pretty sure it was, yeah.
Just jump in, James.
Thank you. Sam, just wondering if you could clarify the use of fast track in a domestic situation.
Yeah, I can. You can't do it. Is there at the moment? That's the long and short of it. And thank you for the question. It's a conversation I've had a lot since the product was launched, but more than ever over the last few weeks, and I'm sure Nick has as well. To be very clear, fast track is no more dangerous to the handler than an SGAR is if handled appropriately. We haven't, and it's nothing to do with the availability of antidotes or anything like that. The decision to put that label language on the product is not a decision made by Bell Labs. When you register a product, the APVMA conducts an assessment and they look at data on various different things. People way smarter than me are involved in doing this. The situation we found with when we registered fast track was the APVMA interpreted some data in a way that no other authority in the world ever has, and it took us completely by surprise. But the outcome of that was they don't want the public anywhere near this product. And in fact, initially, when we were going through the process of finalizing the label, the first draft of the label said, it didn't say don't use it in domestic, it said don't use in domestic situations in refillable bait stations. So the implication there was that a professional pest manager could use a pre-baited bait station that couldn't be opened again. So if we, for example, sold a station that was fixed closed that contained fast track, that you could use it that way. Obviously, we don't make such a thing and no one's going to pay for it. And that label language was very, very messy and unclear. So we made the decision just to remove it altogether. Now, and I appreciate I'm giving you a long answer to a very short question, so thank you for bearing with me. Interestingly, and I think relevantly, in other parts of the world, they have such a different interpretation of it that, for example, in the United States, in retail, if a homeowner wants to buy rodenticide, bromethalin is the only active ingredient they can purchase. So we as an organization are going through the process now, or are beginning the process of challenging the APVMA's interpretation of that data. And if we are successful, and it is a big if, and this is certainly not a promise, but it's just putting it out there. If we are successful in challenging that interpretation of the data, then that product label will be updated and become a bit more user friendly. But as of right now, the label says don't use it domestically, so don't do so.
Yeah, which is a bit of a shame, really, because I use it in some commercial situations with heavy infestations, and it's about the best thing that I've been able to find. So it's a bit of a shame you can't use it in a domestic situation, because it sort of wipes it out of this whole. It sort of wipes it out as an alternative in a domestic situation. So that's a bit of a shame.
Yeah, it is a shame. Thank you for the feedback, though. I am, and our company are collectively, we're very big believers in the active ingredient. We think it's phenomenal active, and yeah, just trust us that we're working on it.
No worries. Thank you very much.
You got it. Thanks for the question.
And just quick, Sam, you mentioned obviously this is very effective on mice as well. This bromethylene.
Yes, it's very effective on rats and mice, but I would say it's the best active ingredient for mice. And I say that I'm not going to present data to prove it, but based on my sort of experience and feedback from our colleagues across the world, absolutely, yeah.
Yep, that's cool. No worries. I'll go to Liv now. You there, Liv?
Yeah, just a quick question. Do you think at some point there will be, people, inspectors coming through and just spot checking these requirements are being fulfilled?
Nick, do you want to answer that question? Because we had an interesting discussion about this on the phone yesterday.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what that discussion was. But
okay, do you want me to prompt you, or
was it the Facebook, that sort of
stuff?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think the inspectors and all those sort of things are going to be your biggest issues. Like operationally as a business, and I obviously don't run one, but whether it's the health department or whoever comes through and gives you that $500 fine or whatever it is that comes to your inbox, that's not something that's, financially hurt your business a little bit. But the people that will police this, and if you have a look at the stories when this review came out, when was it, 4 weeks ago, however long ago it was, there were more comments and likes and everything on Facebook, LinkedIn for the approval to ban these than the Iran war is getting at the minute. So it's more, if you're sort of caught out deliberately sort of flagrantly going against it, it's those people that can affect obviously your Google reviews and everything online and potentially really target your business. Because Sam could probably speak to this more. We work quite closely with some of the wildlife groups, particularly, and so does the industry, such as what are they called, Sam? The name escapes me.
BirdLife.
BirdLife. That's it.
Australia. Yep.
And they're pretty much on board with the fact that professionals want access to this. However, when they're posting, they want to remove from hardware, Bunnings, those sort of things. Their followers don't see that. They mobilise behind it and just say, let's get these products completely banned. So that would be my biggest concern. Are there people out there? You guys know more on the calls how many people have actually ever been audited by the health department or anything themselves. It's not a great number.
I mean, we've been using the lockable, bait stations, since we started business and, for the last however many decades. But just chatting to one of our local other pesties I ran into today, he's like, oh, yeah, if it's a sealed roof, I'd just, chuck a handful of baits up there if there's nothing else up there. There's no point in paying for a station.
Yeah.
And it gives me the heebie-jeebies. Yeah. That, there's still people out there doing that.
Yeah. And that probably goes back to those labels, as Sam mentioned earlier on. These labels have never been instructive in that. They've kind of, suggested a station.
I was going to say common sense isn't really common sometimes anymore.
That's correct. And I think a lot of the wording around that was based about leaving a safe place. But where I might think's a safe place, Sam might not think's a safe place. Nick might have some other discussion. So, I mean, sometimes people think in a roof void's a great safe place. Well, that's great until there's a high winds one night and it blows out and you end up with blocks lying on the pavement. So
I was going to say, one end's just completely open,
Yeah, so these things happen, So I think this wording kind of nails it down a bit because it does say, it's the language is at a base station, So
yep, that's good.
Just to be very direct to answer the first question there, though, Liv, and thank you for it. I think it's very, very well. I'm not giving you a direct answer, but I think it's very unlikely that anyone's going to be, actively enforcing this. Nick mentioned the health department. It's not their concern. There's a lot of different agencies moving in sort of separate circles here. I just, no one's ever enforced, for example, the product labels as they exist prevent use more than 2 meters from a building. We all know that SGARs have been in use more than 2 meters from buildings all over the country for decades. So no one has enforced that yet. And by the way, that's largely what's led us to the situation we're in.
Yes.
So I guess, and not to get too far off the point or to talk too much more, but as an industry, we should take this seriously. And I think our approach should not be, how can we find a way around this where we can continue to do what we've always done, but actually, how do we adapt to this so that we protect these products for the long term?
Yeah, I think it's great, that they're, removing them from, supermarket shelves and things that people don't know what they're doing. And customers, we've had customers, we've arrived to do a general pest and they're like, oh, I bought these baits at Bunnings. Can you just throw them up when you get in the roof? It's like, well, no. So it's going to be all for the better.
Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah, but last point as well, but also your competition will do it as well. So the last thing you want to is your customer be informed by someone from your competition that you're doing something against the law as well.
Yes,
so consider that too.
I'm sure your competition wouldn't want to dob you in or anything. So yeah,
we're all friends.
Hey, that's cool. Aussie Pest Commercial, was that the next one up?
Yes. Hi guys.
Who's that?
My biggest concern is I've got quite a bit of your products in my storage, and I've been using Fast Track on a commercial customer, so that's good. But I'm just concerned where I can use, say, Die Track, even if I want to get away from it totally. Not that it's bad product, obviously, but to get my stock down. Just say this came in and they said you got 6 months before it's implemented, then obviously you would work through your stock and have hardly anything left. So that would be good. I think that's my biggest concern going forward.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure that I can. I mean, obviously I understand the words you're saying, and I don't mean to suggest that, but they're like, you can still use the products. Anywhere you have used them, you can continue to use them. It just requires a slight operational shift. Forgive my ignorance. I know we've spoken before. Your business, are you largely servicing commercial clients?
Yes.
And are most of them on monthly frequencies?
Yes.
Then you're golden.
Oh, okay.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose the biggest thing for me is like a lot of them are like a factory.
You've gone on mute partway through your answer there.
Yeah, they could be in factories out in the bush somewhere, and obviously there's plenty of mice as well as rats, so that they always get eaten pretty much every month, the stations. From that point of view, I think it's okay because obviously you've still got activity, but because of the way they word the mice bit, that's what most probably worried me the most. And
it's smart to consider it. Yeah, if you believe, this is the way I read it, if you believe you're intentionally targeting your target species is rats, then I wouldn't be too worried. Like I did mention in there, mice can't read, right? If you're and the way you can, and I'm certain already you're doing this, like if you had mouse stations around the external perimeter of these factories, it would be really hard to argue that you were targeting rats.
For sure.
But the likelihood is that they're actually rat stations. So I think you're in pretty. But by the way, for the rest of everybody else on the call, I'm not saying if you just use rat stations you can target mice. No, but in this case, I think you've got a fairly strong justification for the continued use.
And I would say also, like if you use the mouse label amount of bait, then obviously that would show that you're just targeting mice as well, rather than putting enough for rats.
Absolutely, very good point.
And I guess that gets down to the spacing as well. Like, I mean, if you walk around your rat stations all at 3 meters, then I'm going to be quite suspicious of that.
But I do that anyway.
Yeah.
Because these sites have so much activity, especially since the weather turns cold. Some of the sites have stations 3-4 meters apart, and like 3/4 of the stations all get hit in 1 month.
Yeah.
Just
As long as you've, sorry, Mark.
Yeah, I would say that kind of activity, you're going to have to make sure you've got second gens in there to fix that problem.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to have to do that. So
And,
Okay,
and
so that's
as long as you have a documented record of that activity, you're in
Yeah,
really
yeah,
good
yeah.
shape.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's
so
fantastic.
makes sense.
Thank
Panic
you.
over.
That's good. Thank you. And Malad, is it same Malad?
Yes, sorry, yes, me again. Sorry.
That's all good.
Just wanted to go back to the 35-day thing.
Yep.
Does the rule apply with first gen or third gen products going for residential settings? I know Bell doesn't have a residential first gen. Solantra and other products are, but does that rule apply to those?
Let me address two things you've said there. Firstly, and I've heard this talked about a lot of times, there is no such thing as a third generation product. When we're talking about first and second generation, we're referring specifically to anticoagulants. So, and my feeling is, and I totally understand how you got there, that when you talk about third generations, you're talking about something that is not an anticoagulant, such as Fast Track or Solantra, right?
Yeah.
But to answer the question as it was intended, no, it does not apply to those products. These new regulations are precisely and very specifically pertaining to SGARs. That is products containing bromadiolone, brodifacoum, difenacoum, diphthiolone, or flucomethane. Those products only. Anything that contains anything else, coumatetralyl, warfarin, difecinone, bromethylene, cholecalciferol, nothing's changing there.
Mm-hmm. And are there any plans to bring out more range of different types of baits, like Fast Track, but obviously for residentials?
So we're always looking at new things, and I can't speak for other manufacturers, of course, but realistically, as I explained previously, the challenge we have with residential and Fast Track is not the product, it's the regulator's interpretation of data. If we're successful in challenging that, I would suggest that changing that product label is as good as a new product. Are we going to release a first generation anticoagulant? Yeah, maybe we will, possibly. We do work with difecinone in other countries, which is a first gen anticoagulant. By the way, I'm not promising you that that's happening. And if we do, it's not going to happen anytime soon because these things take a long time. What we're really interested in at Bell is working with products that are effective and deliver results. It would be, I think, knee-jerk to just go, okay, we're going to launch a first gen just because professionals have to check these after 35 days now. Something else that I think is worth mentioning and pointing out is first generation anticoagulants will continue to be available for public purchase. These new regulations only refer to second gens. So for everyone who's spent many, many years telling me and other representatives of manufacturers that we need to get the products off consumer shelves, well, that's now happened or will be happening. And for the industry to then go, well, we're going to continue to use the same products that our customers can buy, I would find that very surprising. So yeah, those are my thoughts on that matter.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for the question.
And Cassie?
Sorry, taking you off speakerphone.
Gotcha.
Quick question. I've got two actually. You talk about the APVMA being you've got to be registered to use this product. Is that as a distributor or is that as us as pest controllers? We have to go through a process to.
Cassie, are you referring to when I reference to authorized users?
Yes. Do we have to get a permit?
No. So no. And it's a good question, and we've used some language there that I can see how you've got into that position where you're asking the question. So the registrations of these products were suspended, and then the APVMA issued what they refer to as a deemed permit for the continued use, which means as long as as long as you comply with these new label instructions, then the use can continue. When I've talked about authorized users, this is something that will come down the line at some point, probably next year, when the legislative process to turn these products into restricted chemical products, RCPs, when that is complete and these become restricted chemical products, at that point, it will be a requirement to be an authorized person. Now, the question I think you're asking is, what is an authorized person? How do we become one? And the answer is, at this point, Cassie, nobody knows. This is still to be determined. I think, though, it's fairly safe to assume, and people, there are sayings about assumption, but I think it is very safe to assume that professional pest managers, licensed professional pest managers, like the people as yourself and the people in the school, will be deemed authorized people. So I don't think we need to be too concerned about that.
Yeah.
My next question was, if we can't use fast track in a domestic process, what's the best rodenticide to use?
A second generation anticoagulant. One of the products you're already using, a second gen, and go back. That's the
within 30 days. Yeah.
Do 2 visits. Yeah, I truly believe that. Especially more than ever if you're targeting mice, internally, of course. Mice are not going to succumb well to first gens. And these products have been as broadly used as they have been for many years, precisely because they're very, very effective.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah. You're welcome. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, I guess there's a reason why, the majority of what we sold up until 2 weeks ago was second generations, because they were very effective and, they did the job well, especially on those kind of circumstances where you were leaving it, just for in roof voids and things where there was just maybe small consumption and you were getting death, whereas maybe with some of these first gens, you might not get that. You might be getting a call back a few months later. So I guess those are the things we need to consider going forward as well. So that's great. So no other questions. I'll just check there's nothing in the chat. Yep, just the people that joined. That's cool. Well, thank you to Sam and Nick for the presentation. It was kind of put together fairly quickly, so thanks for doing that. I thought it was important just to make sure that we shared as much information and allowed people to ask those questions, because I've taken, I don't know, hundreds of calls in the last 2-3 weeks on this subject, and I guess the guys Sam and Nick have done the same as well. So it's good to get a bit more information out to people. If you want to go back and listen to this, it will be available. It'll get sent out in the next couple of days. And if obviously for anybody who's missed the session tonight, they'll be able to go back and watch it again. But if you've got any other questions, reach out to myself, reach out to Sam or Nick, if we can help you at all. And as I say, this is probably one of the longest sort of sessions we've done. We've never had so many questions, so thanks for all your questions. It kind of brings out a lot of the information, because obviously, we sometimes use language that's not very clear. So thank you for you guys to give us those questions to clarify everything. Thanks again to Belle for putting us on, and we'll sign off there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, and thanks everyone for joining us.
Thank you all.